Well, welcome, everyone. There is a Japanese teacher is from the 16th, 17th century named Takuan Soho, and he he was very involved with training the samurai during that period, and he himself had a very chaotic life. His father was a samurai, and when Takuan was a young boy, his father's master was overthrown and killed. And then that meant that his father was called a ronin, which he was not under the protection of any master. And so he was kind of a free roaming, sort of like a mercenary, but he was not attached to anyone, and he would take up protection of where he could for someone. He worked for someone. And then at that time, Takuan was sent to a monastery, a Zen monastery. And what else? We were in Kyoto last May, a number of us teachers of Civic Zen, and we went to Daitakuji, which is the whole, it's a whole group of different temples in one giant temple complex, and Takuan was one of the teachers there, and he was famous for this daikon radish, which when we went there, they served us tea, and then at the end of the little tea ceremony, they offered to, they had for sale these Takuan daikon radishes, where you can buy these pickled radishes. I looked for, we bought several, and I looked for it in our pantry, but I can't find it. So he was a man of many talents and interests. He was also the person that, when he was dying, there's a tradition in Zen that at the very end of one's life, you pick up a brush and you write your very last poem, some kind of death poem. And when Takuan was dying, in the very last moments of his life, they handed him a brush, and he took it and he just wrote the character for dream. And you can, at the temple in Daitakuji, you'll see, and often in other temples, you'll see that Takuan's image for his calligraphy for dream. And it really refers to this quality of the unfixed motion of reality, where everything is constantly appearing in the fabric of now. And then even in the fabric of now, there's space in the now. The not knowing is infused in even the very moment of now. And then everything falls back into the source of things as the now is appearing. So Takuan, his father being a samurai, and he himself both in the samurai family and raised in with Zen, in a Zen temple, he had these two traditions that were, in his own mind, not separate. And he wrote a whole series of letters and trainings for the samurai to teach them the quality of presence that would save their lives, basically. How can you meet this opponent who has a very sharp sword and not good intentions? And how do you meet that moment and survive? And so he talked about the quality of meditation. When you're beginning meditation, a teacher will often give you these beginning practices where you focus wholeheartedly your attention on your breath, or perhaps you're focused on an image, or you might be focused on a koan, and you just continually bring your attention. And in some kinds of meditation, they have you focus on watching your thoughts, like watching clouds move across the sky, and your attention is focused there and not fixating on any one thought. But you can see, if you try this for any amount of time, that in some ways it can give you some stability of attention that is helpful. But very quickly, you'll begin to notice that it's actually something that's in the way. It's like an apparatus that is between you and your meditation, or you and the world. There's someone doing something. And Takuan was very keen about this point and noticed this. And he had this whole treatise on it, and he called it the inscrutable subtlety of immovable wisdom. And he says, the affliction of ignorant states of fixation. And he said that ignorance is written with a character's meaning no enlightenment, and refers to confusion. And it's a state of fixation. The state of fixation is written with a character meaning a state of lingering, and refers to a practice where you fixate on something, and therefore you lose your life. And in the samurai world, you actually lose your life. But you actually lose your life even if you're not a samurai, because some portion of your life is not alive and you're cutting off some portion of the moment that you're in. A couple days ago, John and I watched The Seven Samurai, and we never watch movies. I think it was the third movie we've ever watched, and I've known him for like 15 years. So it's an unusual event. And in The Seven Samurai, there's this marvelous scene where it's the Akira Kurosawa movie, where these poor, these just like dirt poor, starving peasants who are just trying to survive, and these bandits keep coming to their town and stealing their rice and their harvest right after they harvest it, and then leave them just enough so that they can farm enough to make more millet or rice, and so that the bandits can come and steal it again. So they're just so fed up with this, they decide they're going to go and hire some samurai to protect the village. And at one point, they actually do find one samurai, and now they need 6 more. So this one samurai wants to test these potential hirees. So he sits in a room, and he has this young man stand behind the door with a very big stick. And he says, as the samurai walk in, I want you to hit them on the head, just knock them out. And this young man saying, well, we want to hire them. We want them to come. We don't want to knock them out. And he said, don't worry, just do your best to try to knock them out. So he's waiting there behind the door, and the first one comes in, and he throws this stick down, and the samurai just goes like this and grabs it in midair. Doesn't even look at the young man, and he just laughs. The second one that comes in is this would-be samurai. He really wants to be a samurai, and he pretends that he is a samurai. He's very drunk, and he comes walking in the door, and the guy's got the stick and brings it down and knocks the guy out. And then the third samurai that comes in, he walks in, he comes to the place where the doorway is, and he's about 5 steps away, and suddenly you see him hesitate and take a step back, and he doesn't enter. And then he peeks in and he sees it's his old friend, and then they start to laugh. And he says, "I apologize. I'm so sorry. We were just, playing here for a moment." So I think with that, I'm going to let Tess say a few things.
Perfect. The samurai sword comes down on me. Well, I think I actually had to do that once. I knew the sword was coming, but when I was studying Aikido, the guy would stand in front of you and you'd have to two-step in time, and if not, he'd just swing the sword down, and you quickly learn what's in you in terms of responsiveness. Like, can you not bear the tension that it's going to happen, and so you go too soon? And then he just looks at you like, oh, do you freeze? And so you go a little too late, so he just grazes your arm, or do you panic completely? Or, all the sorts of things that happen, all the things that are in us. And I was looking back at, I liked this invitation, what John wrote, because one, it did feel wildly appropriate that then Allison and I just had to respond from where we were today. I too have had John do that to me, where we were deep in a leadership retreat once and doing a refuge ceremony. And there's a spot that says, teacher will give Teisho now. And we're in the middle of the ceremony, and John just says, "Hey, Tess, give us our Teisho." And but it's interesting because some part of the mind immediately goes, no, I have nothing. I have no time to prepare. This isn't fair. Why didn't he? There's all sorts of objections that start to, but just kind of got quiet for a second. And I looked at the people sitting in front of me taking refuge and just kind of reached for something, and something appeared. And it didn't have to be any harder than that, actually. And we talked about it later, and he said, if nothing had appeared, we would have worked it out. And I said, yeah, I trust that. But that it was interesting to just have to kind of face the moment in its full, I don't know, its full weight, I guess, and not collapse. Or I guess you can see so much of when I read this invitation, I thought, yeah, opinions just get in the way of everything. Like, I woke up, my partner was leaving this morning at 4 a.m. and the alarm went off, and opinions can immediately start going. This is too early. Never mind. I don't think I'll get up. Oh, this is going to make for a really hard day. Maybe it's like I don't actually have to take any of those. I can just get up, and it was fine. And I won't be able to go back to sleep, and I went back to sleep. Even if I hadn't, it's like there's this sort of responsiveness to life, and then there's all the objections and opinions and activities and everything that's going on kind of in the midst of that. And I think what Takuan started to notice, Allison was telling me earlier this morning, is yeah, meditation, that kind of meditation only gets you so far once you open your eyes and start engaging the world. You can quiet your mind, but another Japanese teacher, Hakuin, a couple of centuries later, used to say, meditation is great, but having to actually be in the world. All his awakenings came as a result of realizing he was just part of things unfolding. And it's interesting how this happens. This week I have an uncle and I'm trying to work this out. I think he's a second cousin once removed, but he might be a first cousin twice removed. I can never keep these things straight. But he's around my mother and my uncle's age, but he's sort of my grandmother's cousin. But anyway, they're in town, and from various parts, and they want to spend some time with me. And I spend a good deal of time usually listening to my mother talk about my uncle and how terrible he is, and how he has all these dangerous, frightening opinions, and how he, and then the other one has the other side of the opinions, and it's just as terrible for different reasons. But for some reason, when they wanted to spend time, I just thought, sure. And I noticed that as I've been spending time with them, none of that, none of those opinions, none of that knowledge actually helps in any way. And I don't even find it true when I'm spending time with them. And I've been surprised. This morning I went over to the cousin's house, and he's kind of he looks a little like he could be in The Godfather, but slightly less. He's like an old Italian guy. He's very cute. He was incredibly cute when he was young, and he's standing at the stove with his links of sausage and his fennel and his cooking tomato sauce, and it goes way long, and his stories go way long, and it's just kind of something charming about it. And so none of my opinions and none of my knowledge actually holds weight in being there at all. And it's kind of great because he has this little dog whose legs just every so often don't work. And so the little dog lives in a little bag that he kind of drags behind him, and every so often somebody just has to pick up the little bag and kind of steer the dog. And he's an incredibly sweet little dog, and you can tell he too has no opinions about his condition. He just is responding out of what's. If there's sausage, that's great. If he gets to bark with his friend who's arriving, which was me, that's also great. If he gets pats, that's great. And he just kind of scoots himself along and cozies up on the rug, and life goes on. And so I was thinking about, I liked this thing John had put in here about when faced with a challenging situation, which I don't even think it has to be a challenging situation, actually. Put your mind completely in tune with the present moment. Your thoughts must cease to exist, leaving only observation, accurate understanding, and purposeful action. This does seem like a samurai thing. But I was thinking of a couple of times in my life I've been stuck in really bad snowstorms, like very far from home and needing to get home. And one in particular, when I lived in Salt Lake City, it was either I was going to get home that night or probably not for 2 or 3 days, because where I was staying at the time was up the canyon in Park City. And I was with a couple of friends and in kind of a two-wheel drive Toyota, and thought, sure, I can get up the canyon, why not? And as I was going up the canyon, the sign at the bottom said chains only, and I did not have chains, but somehow in my mind this didn't seem to matter, and I just kept driving. And the snow got so thick. I don't know if you've been in Park City Canyon, but it's pretty windy and it's pretty steep. And I couldn't see. Cars were off the road in every direction, and I couldn't see. And all I could use to navigate was the little reflectors, probably every, I don't know, 50 feet, 50 or 100 feet, that would just say, like, are you going to go off the ravine or not? And in one way, this sounds incredibly stupid, I'll admit, but I also knew that if I had to pull over, I could. There were people pulled over all over the place. But somehow something happened where the only way I can explain it was I became the car. My foot and the pedal sort of became the same thing, the wheel, the everything. My consciousness became in tune with the circumstances, and I could feel exactly how fast I could go and exactly how fast I couldn't go. And I could feel exactly the tires on the road, and I could feel exactly the conditions. And my mind just got dead quiet. And this went on for, however long, an hour or so it took us to get up the hill. And my poor friends, who may never drive with me in a snowstorm again, or might, just put their heads down. They didn't have any idea what to do. But it came to mind in this territory because it doesn't have to be that extreme of a circumstance. You're sitting out in your garden and this might happen, where all of a sudden, the buzz starts to become far more intimate, or the smells start to enter you in a different way. Your mind suddenly quiets of its usual opinions, and the world steps forward. And no, I think what often gets in the way are the sort of we get blinded by either what we think should be happening or shouldn't be happening. And Chan, so much of, the old Chan masters would talk about, their marker for awakening wasn't just this quiet mind, but could you accord with the circumstances in a way that turned the whole situation toward awakening? And could you do it silently? It wasn't about explaining anything or imparting anything, but just with your presence, could you somehow enter the situation more deeply and open it? And I think that's kind of a beautiful invitation, actually, because you can see, that appears everywhere in life. My cousin, the Godfather family, was telling me this story today about how when he was a little kid, he had really, this was in the probably late 50s, he had really intense ADD, and wasn't really a diagnosed thing back then, and so no one really knew what to do with him other than usually to yell at him and tell him to sit still, which of course he couldn't. And he was telling me about his 5th grade teacher who kind of figured this out pretty quickly and put him in the very last row. And he said, which was great. And I thought, why? And he said, because I could keep all of my other projects going while the class was happening, and he knew that. And so along the wall, along the inside of his desk, he had all sorts of other little things going, a catapult set up, or a puzzle, or an everything. And somehow this teacher just knew that's how this kid is going to be able to stay in class. He's got to have some place to put his mind that allows him to stay with the rest of the group. And so the things that just, the responses that appear when it seems like nothing else is possible, it's very interesting to the koan mindset. I'll stop there for a minute and just see, you want to say anything, Allison? Want to add anything?
A couple of things I really liked when you brought up the challenging situation, and how every situation is actually, you find yourself in a human body on this planet in the middle of space, and you know that your body won't last. And in terms of challenging situations, like, we don't need anything more. Simply to find ourselves here is, we're already in the midst of the most, it's like we're always in that the swords crossed moment. We're always in the middle of the center of our life, and every moment is that the universe pressing against our sword in some way. And I love what you said about the silent to silent, just the quality of being, and everyone can feel that, has felt that. If you're listening to this talk today, this is something you yourself know about what happens when the quality of your being is this open, unobstructed field that goes both inwardly and outwardly. It's a quality of being, of communion with one's circumstances. And silence is kind of the center of it, in a way. Silence and space and light. So I think that's a good place to stop. Do you
If
want?
you'd like a koan to keep you company in this territory, there's a story in the Blue Cliff Record about when Yun Men, the great Yun Men, Cloudgate, was on his deathbed. And a student approaches him and says, "What's the teaching that lasts an entire lifetime? What's the teaching of a lifetime?" And Yun Men just says, "Say something in response. Say something." One way of thinking about this is that the moment, whatever moment you're in, and they're always changing on us, it's always appearing through you and through everyone and everything around you. And out of that silence that Allison was just speaking of, something appears. That's your way of being here. Or as Allison said at the beginning, which I loved, those are the current conditions of your awakening. That response. What is the teaching that lasts an entire lifetime? Say something in response. You yourself are the great instrument that the Tao plays its way through. Play something in response. It's raining softly on my metal roof here, and I realized, I could just sit here meditating for most of the rest of the afternoon. I want to see what Allison has to say, but I just noticed there's a couple things I want to say about just the nature of responsiveness. Such a fascinating thing. Like how we talk about this quite a lot with regard to Dokusan or teacher interviews in our world, but it's true of really any place that you have an encounter, that when the encounter arrives, and it could be, the checkout person, or it could be, I had the most extraordinary praying mantis in my garden the other day, or, it could be anything really. It could be a car wreck, could be anything. But when the encounter arrives, things just appear in us. And there's both so much of practice is, can I bear what appears? Because I have all my opinions about it and want to hurry and, I don't know, stick it under my mattress or something, or give it to someone else, or whatever it is. Can I bear what appears? And then can I somehow learn to discern what might be helpful to the situation? And I was thinking during the meditation, one of the other things, because all this has to do in Chan terms with, whether we're making a self or not. That's what it all comes down to, pretty much every time. And I was thinking of this when I had the Aikido guy, this exercise we'd have to do with people, which was, it seemed just incredibly simple. You'd stand with a partner and you'd do something called a two-step in Aikido, which is you just kind of move your body back and forth in kind of a one-step, two-step with theirs. And the idea, your instructions were very simple, which was, can you just see what it's like to be with this person? And what would immediately become clear is whatever their way of being was, whatever their way of moving, whatever their way of feeling time, whatever their self was, their field, either jive with yours very easily or not so much. And the exercise really became, can you bear to try to meet and not either impose what feels comfortable to you or completely become lost in their world? Could you just somehow find each other? And it was amazing in terms of what would appear in one, in me certainly, but I know in other people who did the exercise, because any discomfort would immediately be filled with judgment, usually. You know, if they're slow, like, oh my God. If they're fast, you know, what the fuck? Like, no matter what it was. And so it became this incredibly, and I thought, well, everything's a little like that. Like, we meet wherever we are, we meet our partner or our cat or our refrigerator or our, and can I just bear to be here and see what it's like and respond? Yeah, I have a couple other thoughts, but do you have anything you want to say at the moment, Allison?
I love that. When you said play something in response when after Michael's playing. And yesterday was the first day of autumn here in the northern hemisphere. And we've been waiting, you know, all of our favorite bird, the golden crowned sparrows, have been off gallivanting around and having affairs up in Alaska. And yesterday, I noticed in the garden a bird that I immediately thought, oh, that's got to be one. But usually we hear the sound first. We hear their song before we see them. And I got out the binoculars, and even though it was not that far away, just to make sure. And it was the first golden crown sparrow. And but it was silent. And I was thinking about how silence itself is a song. Silence itself is a response. And I didn't know that Michael was going to be playing today. So when the first note of the flute came, it was the golden crowned sparrow coming out of the silence. It was incredibly touching and beautiful. And then I also thought of something you said, Tess, about how can we bear the encounter without trying to impose something on it or extract something from it. And yesterday when I saw the golden crown and it didn't sing, I had this thought of, I'll go and get my computer and I'll play the song of the golden crown sparrow to try to get it to sing. And that would be, I could felt like, oh, I'm not somehow receiving the song that it's already singing to me. And yeah, can we bear what we're feeling? Can we bear the encounter? And also one more thing, that how and you alluded to this, Tess, that every moment we actually already are in Dokusan. We're in a direct encounter with our lives, with nothing in between. Can we meet this? And it brings a sense of nobility to every moment that you are in, that nothing, the moment you're in is, we so often discard as not worthwhile, but we're discarding our own. There isn't another moment. And how tremendous to have a practice with which the inherent nobility of the encounter is always available. So with that, I think I'll give it back to you, Tess.
Yeah, one more thing to say about that, and then maybe we'll hear from a few golden-crowned sparrows in the temple. This topic, somehow, we were talking just a little bit before, feels very appropriate because I know a number of folks in our community are dealing with parents or loved ones who are at the end of their life in some way. And my partner is also one of those people. And it's been interesting to watch, at least in my house, but I know with others, how to discern what's needed, how to discern what's happening, because there can be such intense, not only fear and grief or uncertainty about what's happening, but Allison was mentioning, and it's true, especially when there are siblings involved or other people involved, there can be all sorts of roles and comparisons and differing opinions about what's happening and what should be happening. It seems a handy territory to explore of just like what belongs to me, what's coming out of me in this moment of the situation right now. Like my partner's dad, for example, is the coolest cucumber I think I've ever met. I don't even know that he completely groks what's happening to him. They woke him up in the middle of the night one night and said, "Sir, do you know how old you are? Do you have any idea where you are?" And he didn't. And he's almost 90, and he said, "I think I'm somewhere in my 60s." And then he looked down at his arms and said to them, "I think that must be incorrect. These arms look much older." And he's not someone who needs a lot of connection. That's just not it's not his currency of love. And yet calling him for 3 minutes, just to say, how's bridge? There's plenty. That's what's actually being asked for. And I know when my own father was passing away, what I had to give at the time was very little. I was in my early 20s. I was just starting out my life. The situation actually didn't benefit a lot from my presence at that time. There was a lot of chaos. And you can tell in those moments external ideas won't help you. I had a friend that tried to say, if you don't spend more time with him, you'll regret it. I said, but somehow the time I'm spending feel like that it was in accord with our relationship and the situation. It wasn't trying to get more, and it wasn't also trying to not have it happen. And so it feels like those moments in particular are kind of deep forms of practice, but we get lots of those. You want to say anything else about that, Allison, before I want to call on a couple people maybe?
Just one thing, something you just said about your friend saying, "Oh, you should spend more time with him," and actually you were spending more time with him. Doesn't mean that spending time with him means you needed to be actually with him. I think that's one of the things that begins to happen is our definitions of what love is, of what friendship means, of what kindness is. Those definitions begin to dissolve and widen and include much more and accord with more our actual circumstances. So yeah, I'd love to hear from some people. I'll let you call on people.
Right. Thanks for that. Let's see. John Joseph, you have anything you'd like to say?
I love both what you were saying, and Tess, you brought up that you found before meeting your distant cousin that it wasn't useful, all the borrowed knowledge and all the ideas and all the opinions, and somehow you're able to put those aside a little bit and meet him directly and bear that, bear that beauty. It's really nice. And then a story came to mind when you were talking about driving up Park City Canyon in the snow, where your foot and the gas pedal in the car, all of a sudden we're somehow working together. And I was talking to a friend one time, and he's a commercial airline pilot, and he's been working on the Koan No, and so he's flying the plane, and he's just absorbed in No, soaking into No, and he's about to turn in. He's the Airbus, huge airplane with 200 people on back. He's about to turn into the airport, and he realized that No is banking left into the airport, and it felt really wonderful to him. I was telling another friend about the story, and she said, well, don't you think it's dangerous to work on koans while you're flying an airplane? And I thought, it's probably dangerous not to be working on koans while flying an airplane. Thank you.
That's great, John. Thank you. Christina Schmiegel, would you like to say anything?
I'm not sure how related this is, but it's the thing that's sitting with me. So the last few days I've been teaching myself how to mend darn socks, and because I have lots of wool socks that are perfectly good wool socks, but they have holes in the heels, and I thought, I'm gonna fix this, and so I've been teaching myself how to do that. And it's been, I think, Allison used the word nobility. So I'm working on, I'll show you one of my darn socks. So I had lots of opinions about the fact that I have so many other things to do, and here I'm sitting here darning these socks, but it was so pleasurable that I kept thinking, I need to get up, but then I'd think, I'll just do a little more. And at some moment it came over me that if I were to, after somebody's passing, like we were thinking about parents passing, how you have to pack up their things, and if I'd open up a drawer of somebody's socks and they were all darned, that would really speak to something about a life, and that it seemed like such a, it's such a small, ridiculous thing, and yet it just seemed really vast. It just opened up in a way that was really moving to me, and I had a memory of somebody who used to babysit for us when we were kids, and I had never thought about this since then, but his heels of his socks were always red. And it occurred to me yesterday while I was darning that somebody had been darning his socks. And there was just this huge love in there that somebody had been doing that for him. And so I guess it's that, that thing you're talking about at the moment, that somehow in this incompletely, couldn't be a more mundane moment. And yet it was holding this tremendous amount of vastness in all kinds of directions of time and compassion. And yeah, so.
That's great. I think that's, the thing that John had put at the very beginning of this note about the art of living through deep paying attention. It's like anything that I'm possibly doing, grooming the dead leaves off a plant, darning socks, stirring soup, whatever it is, if I bring my whole being to it, then the universe is in there. The whole universe is in each piece. Have anything you want to say to that, Allison?
Well, I was thinking it made me think of this man I knew from Scotland. He was the groundskeeper and custodian at the school I worked at. And he had been in the Vietnam War, and then he was so he couldn't bear just being himself after that, and so he made his way to Japan, and I don't know how this idea came into his mind, but he decided he was going to join a Zen monastery. So he tells this story, and it was his one encounter with Zen. It was like, I don't know, 50 years ago or something. And he said he sat outside. He said, they wouldn't let me in, I don't know why. They just wouldn't let me in for days. And I just had to sit outside the monastery. And then finally they let me in. And then he said, and they wouldn't let me meditate. He was there for 3 months. And he said they gave him a little soft cloth, and they told him to clean the tops and the bottoms of the leaves on all the plants in the garden. And that's all he did every day. And somehow that was all he could bear, was simply to have this sort of intimate encounter with these leaves. And it gave him some kind of entry back into life. It's a bit like the darning is some intimate contact with, there's a kind of humility in that gesture that I think is really incredibly beautiful.
Glad I asked. Angela Raquel, sitting glowing in the embers. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just your story about driving in the snow made me think of something I heard on the radio recently here, which was a woman was describing driving in a thunderstorm in South Gippsland, which is an area in the southeast mainland of Australia, granite country, and there are all sorts of stories about how lightning behaves differently in granite country. Anyway, she was driving and the storm came, and lightning hit her car twice. It hit the windscreen and then it hit the bonnet, and didn't hit her body directly. The charge was deflected or distributed, but this sense of enormous shock, of course, and great energy. And she said at first, and her immediate sort of fight response was, I have to keep driving. I just have to get home. She said, but I knew my mind was behaving unusually. And she said, at first, I thought I had somehow left the car. I'd got out of the car, even though I was driving. And then she said, and then I realised that I was the landscape. And she said, and the storm was my heart, and I was driving through my heart. And somehow that was just seemed, it's an extraordinary experience, obviously, and it had many ongoing ramifications in her life, but just that sense of, yep, we're all always just driving through that storm that's our heart. Mm-hmm. So, thanks.
Wow. Thank you. The other thing that strikes me about that is I like that you said the lightning behaves unusually. I guess that's the nature of responsiveness, is that everything is behaving unusually, and if we can bear it, it opens out like that. Wow. You have anything? I'm thinking we sit just a few more minutes. Allison, you have anything else you want to say? Well, thank you everyone for being with us this morning. Thank you, Michael, for that incredible playing. Thank you to those who spoke. and those who gave silence. Thanks for being with us. And Allison, you want to say anything before we turn it over to Amaryllis?
Well, I want to thank you, Tess, for at the very last moment agreeing to come and teach this morning. And was so happy to get that response from you, and how much fun it was to spend this morning with you and with everyone here in the temple. Thank you all for staying. And it was really a lot of fun and great pleasure.